Welcome to the Alpha's Obsession, a werewolf fated mate romance, where fate is messy, the sparks are wild, and the full moon brings more than just fur and fangs. There's snark, steam, and a mate, bond neither of them asked for, but can escape. Buckle up, pack. From haunted hearts to ancient curses, you'll find stories here that pull you in and don't let go. If you're into tales that twist the real and the unreal, you're in the right place. TM Nyxen Audiobooks, hit that subscribe button and let's dive in. Quote, "You can stare at the moon until your eyes ache, but it will never fall just because you love it harder." The scent of pine and damp earth clung to the morning air like a stubborn ghost as Kane paced across the wooden floor of his pack's great hall. His heavy boots thudded in rhythm with a pounding in his chest, not from exertion, but from irritation. The Alliance Party loomed, a yearly trial of diplomacy and veiled threats disguised as celebration. "Damn politics," he muttered, brushing a hand through his thick dark hair. "Every year the same damn circus. Smile, nod, agree, appease. As if our survival hinges on flattering egos and trading empty promises. The truth was, it often did. His beta, a wiry, sharp-eyed wolf named Jarek, leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "The Alliance Party isn't just some social gathering, Kane. It's the foundation of our peace. You don't want to be the alpha who lets the whole thing collapse because of a bad mood, do you?" Kane shot a glare that could have melted steel. "You think I don't know that? I've kept this pack safe for 10 years without dancing for other alphas. I faced down rogues, navigated droughts, and expanded our territory. Why does it always have to be me bending over backwards to keep some fragile alliance intact?" In his mind, the alliances were shifting sands, easily manipulated by ambition and fear. He saw through the cordial smiles and felt the undercurrents of distrust like a physical weight. Jarek shrugged. "Because you're the strongest. They want to see the alpha at the top, not the one brooding in his den. They need to know you're still the force to be reckoned with." Kane snorted. "Strength isn't just about muscles or fangs, Beta. Sometimes it's about patience. Too bad patience isn't one of my virtues." He craved action, the clean, decisive force of claw and tooth. The intricate dance of politics felt stifling, a waste of his time and energy. From the corner, a young wolf with bright eyes and a quick smile entered, carrying a tray of freshly brewed herbal tea. "Morning, Alpha. The medics say you should drink something calming before the party. Says it helps with political headaches." Kane smirked. Have you ever met an alpha who needed calming before a party? But even as he spoke, a knot of tension tightened in his shoulders. The weight of expectation, the constant vigilance, the isolation of leadership, it was a burden only another alpha could truly understand. The young wolf chuckled nervously. "No, sir, but maybe one who shouldn't be so grumpy." "Careful with that wit, Jalen," Jarek warned. "You're in the den of a brooding beast." Jalen grinned. "I'd rather face a beast than a bored alpha any day." Kane laughed, a low rumble that softened his stern face. He appreciated Jalen's honesty, even if it was a little reckless. It was a rare thing to find in a pack where respect often bordered on fear. All right, maybe I'll try this tea." He took a tentative sip. "Sandalwood? You're trying to turn me into a willow tree, Jalen." As Kane lifted the cup, his eyes flicked to the window where the distant woods seemed to shimmer in the early sunlight. His pack was strong, loyal, and efficient, everything an alpha needed. Yet, a hollow gnawed inside him, like a restless wolf pacing in a cage. Everyone sees the alpha, the leader, he thought. But who sees Kane? Who sees the wolf yearning for something more than dominance, more than power? The weight of responsibility pressed down, a stark reminder of his solitude. He was surrounded by his pack, yet utterly alone. "Any news from the other packs about the Alliance Party?" Kane asked, voice dipping into a quieter tone. Jarek's jaw tightened. "Rumors. Torrance pack is arriving with their Luna Nemera. She's said to be as sharp as a blade and the kind of woman who doesn't bend." Kane's eyes narrowed. "Good. Maybe the politics will be more interesting this year. A challenge, a worthy opponent. That might at least make the ordeal bearable." Jalen glanced between them. "Or dangerous. Danger is part of the job," Kane replied, setting down his cup with a decisive click. He strode towards the center of the hall. "Jarek, let's spar." It wasn't a request. Jarek straightened, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. Physical exertion was Kane's way of channeling his frustration. Now? Before the party? Now, Kane insisted, his voice edged with impatience. I need to sharpen my claws. They moved to the open space, the air thickening with a primal tension. Kane circled Jarek, his movements fluid and predatory. He feinted left, then lunged right, forcing Jarek to parry. The clash of their bodies filled the hall, a brutal ballet of strength and skill. Kane fought with a ferocity that bordered on recklessness, pushing Jarek harder and harder. You're holding back, Kane growled, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Don't treat me like an invalid, Jarek. Fight. Jarek, his face grim, met Kane's intensity, unleashing his power. He landed a blow that staggered Kane, a jolt of pain shooting through his arm. Good, Kane said, a predatory smile twisting his lips. Now you're awake. He pressed his advantage, driving Jarek back towards the wall. He was faster, stronger, and more ruthless. But even as he forced Jarek to submit, pinning him against the wall with his forearm, he felt no satisfaction, only a deeper emptiness. He released Jarek, stepping back. Get ready, Kane said, his voice softer now, the edge of impatience replaced with a stark weariness. Let's get this over with. He knew he was pushing Jarek, testing his loyalty, but he couldn't seem to stop himself. It was a way of confirming his strength, a desperate attempt to quell the insecurity that gnawed at him. He needed to feel in control, even though he was increasingly aware that control was an illusion. The den grew silent for a moment as the weight of the coming night settled over them. Kane stood, a titan among wolves, powerful yet tethered to the duties he despised. But deep beneath his alpha armor, a flicker of something unspoken simmered a hunger, not for power, but for something far more elusive, a connection, understanding, perhaps even love. But those were luxuries an alpha couldn't afford. He had a pack to lead, alliances to maintain, and a carefully constructed image to uphold. He pushed the yearning down, buried it deep within the wolf that howled only in his dreams. He was Kane, alpha of the Blood Moon Pack, and he would play his part, even if it meant sacrificing the very thing he craved most. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Silverclaw Pack's lodge, casting soft silver hues that danced across the polished wooden floors. Nyxen stood in front of the tall mirror, adjusting the sleek, shimmering dress that clung to her like liquid moonlight. The material, a rare silk woven with threads of pure silver, rippled with every subtle movement, catching the light and reflecting it in a dazzling display. The faint embroidered crest of their pack-two wolves entwined beneath a rising moon flowed elegantly down the back, starting just below her shoulder blades and cascading to the floor, catching every beam of light. She glanced over her shoulder and smiled, sharp-eyed and radiant. I'm no one's fool, Torn, she said, voice playful but firm. If anyone at the Alliance party thinks otherwise, they're in for a surprise. She turned fully, striking a pose as if daring him to disagree. Torrin, standing nearby in his crisp pack attire, dark, tailored tunic with silver accents and the same crest emblazoned on his chest above his heart grinned, his gaze lingering on her figure. Good, because you're far too clever to be underestimated. Besides, he added with mock seriousness, I need all the help I can get to keep you from stealing the show. You know you'll have every alpha in the room practically tripping over themselves to get a dance. Nyxen laughed softly, the sound warm and confident, like the crackling of a comforting fire. That's my plan. I'll distract them with dazzling beauty while you secure the trade agreements. She stepped closer, her hand finding his and threading her fingers through his. So, Alpha, are you ready? Tonight is more than a party, it's a statement. Our alliance, our strength, and maybe a little friendly competition. She winked, squeezing his hand just enough to challenge him. Torrin's eyes twinkled with excitement, mirroring the silver in her dress. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Always ready for a challenge, especially one involving you, Luna. And I can't wait to see the others. Old friends, new challenges, potential rivals. It's the highlight of the year, and a very important one if we want to secure the future of the Silverclaw Pack. He paused, his expression turning serious. We need to demonstrate we're a force to be reckoned with. As they prepared to leave, Amos, Torrance Beta, entered the room, eyes sharp as ever, missing nothing. "Everything in order, Luna? Alpha?" he asked, his tone respectful but direct. Nymera nodded, ready to face whatever the night brings. "Though I suspect most of it will be men tripping over themselves trying to compliment my dress," she joked, earning a chuckle from Torrin. Amos's gaze flicked briefly to Nymera's dress, then to Torrin's steadfast expression, noting the easy affection between them. "Good. We'll need to be at our best. Tonight is crucial." The other packs are watching us closely. The journey to the grand hall where the alliance was being held was filled with easy conversation and light teasing, their bond unmistakable. They debated strategy, ribbed each other about their dancing skills, and shared quiet moments of reassurance. Torrin's steady presence was a calm anchor to Nymera's razor-sharp mind, and together they embodied the perfect balance of strength and grace, a harmony that radiated outwards, inspiring confidence in their pack. When they arrived at the grand hall, alight with chandeliers and teeming with guests, Nymera took a moment to survey the crowd. Powerful alphas and their lunas mingled, laughter and tension weaving through the air like a charged current. The scent of expensive perfume, strong cologne, and underlying anticipation hung heavy in the air. But Nymera's eyes sought only one thing: unity, or at least the illusion of it, for the sake of the alliance. "Torrin," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rising hum of conversation. "This is our moment. Let's show them exactly who we are." She met his gaze, her own filled with determination and a hint of playful challenge. He squeezed her hand gently, his eyes reflecting her fire. "Always, Luna. Always. And remember," he murmured, leaning closer, "try not to outshine me too much." He winked, and together, they stepped into the glittering chaos, ready to lead. The grand hall of the Alliance Party was a sensory overload, a calculated symphony of power and pretense. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, casting a dazzling light upon the swirling mass of wolves. The air hummed with a low thrum of conversation, punctuated by bursts of laughter that felt manufactured, forced to convey mirth rather than genuine joy. The scent of expensive cologne mingled with the earthy musk of wolf form, creating a heady, intoxicating aroma that spoke of wealth and primal instinct. Beneath the ostentatious display, the wolves navigated a complex social dance. Packs, each identifiable by subtle variations in dress and demeanor, clustered together like wary herds. The Northern Peaks pack, known for their stoic pragmatism, stood stiffly near the buffet, their gazes sharp and observant. Across the room, the Riverbend clan, notorious for their cunning and ruthlessness, engaged in boisterous games of chance, their laughter echoing a little too loudly, their movements a little too bold. The unspoken rules of engagement dictated that, while outward civility was maintained, the true game was one of strategic positioning, vying for favor and influence within the alliance. Deals were brokered in hushed whispers behind velvet curtains, and alliances were tested with loaded pleasantries exchanged over glasses of shimmering wine. Kane entered the hall, the weight of his alpha presence preceding him. His tailored suit, the color of midnight, did little to mask the raw power he exuded. He moved with a predator's grace, his dark eyes scanning the room, cataloging strengths and vulnerabilities. The low hum of conversation seemed to lessen as he passed, heads turning subtly to acknowledge his presence. He was a force to be reckoned with, a king surveying his domain. Then he saw her. Across the crowded room, Nymera moved like a silver wraith, her dress shimmering with every step. The fabric flowed around her, highlighting the regal grace of her movements. Despite the chaos surrounding her, she possessed an aura of serene composure. She was not merely present, she commanded attention. Her senses were clearly on high alert, her head tilted slightly as she subtly assessed those around her. There was a quiet strength in her posture, an unspoken warning to keep their distance. Their eyes met, and the world contracted. The noise faded, the glittering chandeliers blurred, and only she remained. Kane felt a jolt, a visceral reaction that shook him to his core. It wasn't just attraction, it was recognition, a deep, primal connection that resonated within the very bones of his wolf. His inner beast, usually a tightly leashed force, surged with a possessive growl, desperate to claim her. He felt an almost unbearable urge to cross the room, to touch her, to confirm that she was real. Nymera, no stranger to intense gazes, met his look head on, her expression betraying nothing. Her silver eyes, usually warm and inviting, were now cool and assessing. She lifted her chin slightly, a subtle act of defiance, and offered a polite, almost impersonal smile. It was a smile that acknowledged his presence, but also drew a clear line. I see you, Alpha Cain, and I am not impressed. You hold no sway here. Amos, ever watchful, trailed behind Cain. He had been prepared for the usual power displays, the subtle posturing of alpha wolves, but the way Cain was looking at Nymera, it was different. It was possessive, almost ravenous, and it sent a chill down Amos's spine. He nudged Torin, who stood nearby, his expression a mixture of bored indifference and watchful vigilance. Watch Cain, Amos hissed, his voice barely audible above the din. There's something dangerous in the way he looks at Nymera. He's not just assessing a rival Luna, he's sizing up a prize. Torin frowned, his hand instinctively moving to rest on the hilt of the hidden blade at his waist. He trusted Nymera implicitly, trusted in their carefully forged alliance, but he couldn't deny the palpable tension radiating from Cain. He hoped Nymera could handle herself, but he would be ready to intervene if necessary. Cain approached her, his footsteps slow and deliberate, each movement calculated to maximize his impact. The closer he got, the more intense the pull he felt. He stopped before her, his towering frame casting a shadow over her smaller figure. Luna, he said, his voice a low, resonant drawl, laced with a hint of barely suppressed desire. You wear your pack's honor well. I've heard tales, but seeing you here is something else entirely. Nymera tilted her head, her silver eyes glinting with cool amusement. And you must be Cain, the infamous Alpha with a reputation that precedes him. Her voice was smooth, controlled, but laced with a subtle undercurrent of steel. She wasn't intimidated, merely cautious. He smiled, a slow, almost predatory curl of his lips that revealed a glimpse of the wolf beneath. Infamous, huh? I like the sound of that. Be careful, Nymera replied, her voice unwavering. Reputations can be misleading. Sometimes they're carefully crafted masks. Cain's gaze dropped briefly to the intricate crest embroidered on the back of her dress, the symbol of her pack, a swirling vortex of stars against a midnight blue background. Maybe, but I intend to learn the truth, to see what lies beneath the surface. He raised his eyes back to her, his tone challenging. The air crackled with unspoken tension. Cain's wolf was snarling internally, desperate to break through the civilized facade and claim what it considered its own. He wanted to pull her close, to breathe in her scent, to taste the defiance on her lips. But Nymera stepped back, subtly widening the distance between them, reclaiming her personal space with quiet strength. Enjoy the party, Cain. Alliances are built on respect, not obsessions. Remember that if you want to do business with my pack. He laughed, a dark, low sound that lacked warmth. You're wise beyond your years, Luna. I'll remember that, but I make no promises. As Cain moved away, disappearing back into the throng, Amos's warning echoed in Nymera's mind. She knew power when she saw it, and Cain possessed it in spades. But there was something else there, something darker, something that set him apart from the other alphas. He wasn't just interested in her power or her pack's resources. He wanted her, and that made him dangerous. Something had shifted tonight, a predatory awareness that had been unleashed in the shadows of the Grand Hall. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that Cain wouldn't let it go. The moon hung low and bleak over the pack grounds, casting long, skeletal shadows as the post-celebration gathering wound down. Cain sat alone, half hidden in the inky recesses of his den, a goblet of potent whiskey clutched in his hand. The fire and the hearth did little to warm the chill that emanated from him, the real heat burning instead within his eyes. It was a possessive, predatory gleam that no amount of drink or forced joviality could extinguish. Nymera, The name resonated in the chambers of his mind, a rhythm deep and insistent, like the relentless throb of a second heartbeat. It was more than just a name, it was an obsession blooming, fed by her captivating presence. Her scent, a subtle blend of silk and steel, lingered everywhere, a phantom echo of her brief passage. He could still hear the sharp cadence of her voice, still feel the unnerving intelligence of her gaze. It wasn't a simple attraction, not a mere physical desire. Darker, deeper urges stirred within him, a yearning that bordered on ravenous. His wolf, usually a disciplined part of his psyche, snarled restlessly within, demanding what it believed was rightfully his. It tasted Nymera's strength, her defiance, and found in it not a deterrent, but an irresistible challenge. "You don't have to chase ghosts, Cain," Jarek said, his voice a low rumble as he stepped cautiously into the den. He knew better than to intrude when Cain was in such a mood, but the situation demanded intervention. She made it clear where she stands. "You're playing a dangerous game." Cain's jaw clenched, the muscles bunching beneath the skin. He tossed back the whiskey, the fire momentarily reflected in his narrowed eyes. "Danger is part of the game, Jarek. A crucial element, wouldn't you agree? Besides," a cruel smile flickered across his lips, "I'm not accustomed to being told no, especially not by a woman." Jarek shook his head, his weariness evident. "No means no, Cain. It's a simple concept, even for you. And when that no comes from Nymera, you'd be wise to listen. She's not some trembling pup you can intimidate." Meanwhile, across the expanse of the pack grounds, Nymera moved through the thinning crowd, her senses heightened. Her awareness a steel net cast wide. The laughter and casual chatter washed over her, but she remained vigilant. She had noticed Cain's increasing presence throughout the evening, those lingering glances that felt like physical touches, the subtle shifts in proximity that were too frequent to be coincidental. She knew she was being hunted, even if the hunt was still veiled in a pretense of civility. At her side, Torn chuckled softly, swirling the remains of his drink in his glass. "Looks like Cain's taken quite the shine to you, Luna. You've certainly captured his attention." He seemed more amused than concerned, relishing the potential drama. Nymera gave a tight smile, her eyes scanning the surrounding area. "He's persistent. One might even call it single-minded." Torn's grin widened, a flash of predatory interest in his own eyes. "I like a little competition. Keeps things interesting." He seemed to view Cain's attentions on Nymera as a twisted form of entertainment. From across the room, Amos observed Cain's every move with growing alarm. He saw the possessiveness radiating from him, the way he tracked Nymera like a predator stalking its prey. It was more than just fleeting lust. It was a deep-seated, unsettling obsession. He approached Torn quietly, laying a hand on his arm, his voice low but laced with urgency. "This isn't a game, Torn," Amos warned, his gaze unwavering. "Cain's obsession isn't just lust. It's something darker, more dangerous. He's already crossing lines, testing boundaries, and he won't stop unless someone makes him." Torn raised an eyebrow, still amused. "Cain's always been a handful. Runs hot, you know. But Nymera's strong, Amos. She can handle it. Besides, she's got her protectors." He gestured to the other members of her guard. Amos didn't budge, his expression grim. "She can't handle Cain if you don't take this seriously. He's not operating on a level playing field. He's powerful, entitled, and utterly convinced he deserves whatever he desires. You need to protect her, Torin. All of you. This isn't some trivial flirtation." Later, as the remaining embers of the party flickered, Cain saw his opportunity. He approached Nymera again, his movements fluid and purposeful, his voice dripping with calculated charm. "You seem immune to me, Luna. That's intriguing. A challenge I don't take lightly." He invaded her personal space, his presence close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. Nymera's eyes hardened, the cool steel within them intensifying to a frigid frost. She didn't flinch, didn't retreat. Instead, she met his gaze head on, her voice low and resonant, carrying a weight of warning. "You should be careful what you challenge, Cain." Some challenges are better left unanswered. She held his gaze, unwavering, making it clear that she wasn't intimidated by his power or his reputation. The tension between them crackled like static electricity, a silent, dangerous exchange of power. Kane's obsession wasn't just a personal battle anymore, a matter of wounded pride or thwarted desire. It was escalating, festering, becoming a palpable threat not just to Nyxen herself, but to the fragile piece of the pack and everything she represented. It was a powder keg waiting for a spark. The celebration had spilled outside into the moonlit garden behind the Alliance Hall, where lanterns hung from high branches, casting soft glows over groups of mingling wolves. Laughter and the scent of grilled meat drifted in the air, but beneath it all, Kane prowled like a storm cloud in a ballroom. His silver fur seemed to absorb the light, leaving him shrouded in an almost palpable darkness as he scanned the crowd, his amber eyes narrowed and predatory. He was a master strategist, a ruthless leader, and tonight, his carefully constructed composure was threatening to crack. He saw her. Nyxen stood by the fountain, surrounded by two Lunas from the Western Ridge Pack, her posture relaxed, her laughter genuine. The fountain's gentle cascade seemed to harmonize with her easy grace, and the moonlight painted her dark fur with ethereal highlights. Kane found himself momentarily captivated, a dangerous emotion he immediately suppressed. He was here for power, alliances, and control, not to be swayed by the beauty of a Luna who held no interest in him. Kane didn't think. He moved. His long strides ate up the distance between them, his intent as sharp and focused as a wolf on the hunt. He was tired of playing games, of subtle power plays and veiled threats. He wanted Nyxen, or at least he wanted her to acknowledge his dominance. Luna Nyxen, he said smoothly, cutting through the conversation like a blade. His voice, usually a low rumble that commanded respect, was artificially sweetened, a honey trap. May I borrow you for a moment? The other women quieted, glancing between them with thinly veiled curiosity. The air crackled with unspoken tension. They knew who Kane was, what he represented. Every wolf within a mile could sense the power rolling off of him in waves. Nyxen gave a pleasant, professional smile, but something in her shoulders tensed barely perceptible. But Kane, with his heightened senses, didn't miss it. It was a silent challenge, a subtle refusal to be intimidated. Kane extended a hand, not touching, just suggesting. It was a gesture of dominance, an expectation of obedience. There's a matter of security I'd like your insight on. A potential threat vector regarding the Northern Territories. Something I'd prefer not to discuss in a crowd. He added the last part with a suggestive glance at the two other Lunas, implying that they weren't privy to such sensitive information. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes glinted with amusement. I'm flattered, Alpha Kane, but if it's a matter of security concerning all of our territories, perhaps my Alpha should be included? His insights are, after all, rather comprehensive. There was a subtle emphasis on the last word, a playful dig at Kane's thinly veiled attempt to exclude Torrent. Kane's jaw ticked, a sign of his simmering frustration. He hated being outmaneuvered, especially by a Luna he considered to be beneath him. I thought your mind might work more freely without distractions. Alpha Torrent does have a passionate approach to leadership. The implication hung heavy in the air. Torrent was too emotionally driven, and Nyxen was the real brains behind the operation. Little did he know. Her eyes sharpened, the playful amusement replaced by a cool, assessing gaze. Funny. I find distractions easy to tune out. Unwanted pressure, on the other hand, well, that tends to speak louder. Her voice was deceptively soft, but each word dripped with unspoken meaning. She was calling him out, exposing his manipulative tactics for everyone to see. A few heads nearby turned, drawn in by the palpable tension. Kane didn't move, his posture unyielding, but the clenching in his jaw said everything. He was losing control, and he knew it. Nyxen stepped closer, not in submission, but command. She closed the distance between them, invading his personal space with an almost unsettling confidence. Her voice lowered to a purr that was anything but flirtatious. It was a warning, a promise of consequences. If this is a real concern, Bring it to Torin. He's perfectly capable of assessing any threat to our pack. If it's anything else, she tilted her head slightly, her eyes locking onto his. Then stop wasting my time. I have more important things to do than entertain your ego. Before Kane could form a reply, before he could salvage the situation, Torin arrived with the casual precision of someone who had been watching for just this moment. He moved with a fluid grace, his presence radiating a quiet strength that instantly diffused the tension in the air. Everything all right here? Torin asked, his voice calm, but with an undercurrent of steel that only Kane could fully appreciate. He slipped beside Nymera and slid a hand around her waist knot. Possessive, not aggressive, but solid, grounded. It was a silent declaration. She was his, and he would protect her. Nymera nodded smoothly, leaning slightly into Torin's touch. Alpha Kane wanted my opinion on a security issue. I advised him to take it to you, as it concerns the whole pack. She met Torin's gaze, her eyes conveying a silent message of trust and reassurance. Torin looked squarely at Kane, his gaze unwavering, his expression calm and iron strong. Then we'll handle it together. He placed a subtle emphasis on the word together, a clear message that Kane's attempts to isolate Nymera had failed. Kane gave a slow, tight smile. It was a mask, barely concealing the fury simmering beneath the surface. Of course, he knew he'd been outmaneuvered, but he refused to show it. Torin's voice dropped just enough for Kane alone to hear, a velvet, smooth whisper that carried a chilling weight. Let me be clear, Kane. She's not yours to chase, charm, or test. Show respect, or I'll show you what disrespect earns. The implication was clear. Crossing Torin meant incurring his wrath, and that was a price Kane might not be willing to pay. Kane's smile didn't move, but his eyes darkened, reflecting the predatory glint of a cornered wolf. I'm only here to protect alliances. He tried to salvage his pride, to frame his actions as being in the best interest of the alliance. Torin leaned in, his voice like velvet over steel, sending a shiver down Kane's spine. Then, stop trying to unravel mine. My alliance with Nymera is stronger than any treaty you could offer. He was drawing a line in the sand, warning Kane not to interfere in his pack's internal affairs. Nymera watched silently, her spine straight, her expression unreadable. She was a silent observer, a master strategist in her own right, assessing the power dynamics at play. But when Kane stepped back and nodded once, a gesture of grudging respect and simmering resentment, her expression softened, and she let out the softest breath, a silent release of tension. The dance had begun, and Kane, for all his power and carefully laid plans, had been the one left standing alone in the moonlight, defeated and humiliated. He had underestimated Nymera's intelligence and Torin's protectiveness, and he had paid the price. The game was far from over, but tonight, Nymera and Torin had won. The soft rustle of paper filled the war room as Amos flipped through the old reports he'd unearthed, yellowed with age and half redacted, but not enough to hide the ugly truth underneath. The silence was punctuated only by the occasional click of his claws against the wooden table as he turned a page, the rhythmic sound a counterpoint to the growing unease in his gut. He sat alone under low lantern light in the quiet hours after the party, his brow furrowed, lips pressed tight. The reports weren't official, of course. Kane had always been good at avoiding that. But whispers? Amos had a sixth sense for whispers, a talent honed over years of navigating pack politics and sniffing out deception. It was those whispers, the half-truths and hushed conversations, that painted the most damning picture. Aluna from Black Hollow, who left her pack overnight, supposedly to pursue a solo life in the wild, only to disappear without a trace weeks later. A beta who mysteriously vanished after questioning Kane's decisions regarding territory expansion. His disappearance was dismissed as a rogue animal attack. A quiet but steady pattern of obsessive behaviors control, jealousy, isolation. Even the wolves who had once benefited from Kane's influence had tales, spun over late-night drinks and furtive glances about his possessiveness and volatile temper. None of it ever confirmed, but all of it pointed in one direction. Kane didn't handle rejection. He took what he wanted her, destroyed it. Amos growled low in his throat, the sound a rumble of barely contained fury. He remembered the way Cain had looked at Nymera at the celebration, the possessive glint in his eyes, the casual touch of his hand on her arm, a gesture far too familiar for a recent acquaintance. To confirm his suspicions, Amos spent the next morning tracking down River, an aging wolf who'd once been a close confidant of Cain within the Ashwood pack. The meeting took place near the border between their territories, the air thick with unspoken distrust. River, wary and guarded, initially denied any knowledge of Cain's darker side, but after Amos pressed him, hinting at the information he already possessed, the old wolf reluctantly admitted to witnessing Cain's zeal in securing his objectives. River refused to elaborate, fearful of retribution even years later, but the fear in his eyes spoke volumes. By dawn, he was in Torin's office, the sun rising behind him like a halo of urgency. He hadn't slept, fueled by adrenaline and the urgent need to protect Nymera. Torin was mid-conversation with the junior scout when Amos entered with storm energy in his stride. The scout wisely cleared out, sensing the tension crackling in the air, as Amos dropped the old files on the desk with a heavy thud. I don't care how charming he acts. Cain is dangerous. Torin raised a brow, flipping through the pages. These are old. Rumors at best. He spoke calmly, but Amos saw a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. He knew Torin valued solid evidence, wasn't one to be swayed by gossip. Amos leaned forward, voice low. Patterns, Torin. Repeated behavior. And every time someone questioned it, boom, gone. Silenced. Discredited. You think it's a coincidence that he's suddenly taken an interest in our Luna? He let the question hang in the air, knowing it would hit its mark. Torin's eyes narrowed at that, his fingers pausing on a file mentioning a Luna who'd relocated voluntarily only to disappear a week later. He saw the connection now, the disturbing parallel between the past and the present. He's calculated, ruthless, and if you don't step up now, he'll test how far he can push. Amos's words were a challenge, but also a plea. He trusted Torin's strength and his love for Nymera, but he needed to be certain the Alpha was willing to act. For a long moment, Torin was silent, his face unreadable. Amos knew he was weighing his options, considering the potential fallout of confronting Cain directly. Would it destabilize the fragile alliances between packs? Would it escalate into a full-blown conflict? Amos wrestled with his conflicting loyalties. Should he tell Nymera directly? Warn her about Cain and his history? He ultimately decided against it, at least for now. He didn't want to frighten her, to burden her with anxieties she didn't need. He trusted Torin to handle the situation with the necessary level of discretion and force. Then he stood, walking to the wide window that overlooked their training grounds. Nymera was there, instructing young wolves in diplomacy radiant, composed, completely unaware of the shadows shifting behind her. The sight of her filled Torin with a fierce possessiveness and a chilling premonition of what could be lost. Torin clenched his fists. I thought I could handle this without turning it into a power show, he said, voice low, a mixture of regret and determination in his tone. I thought he'd back off once he realized Nymera wasn't interested. He admitted his misjudgment, a rare admission for an alpha. And if he doesn't, Amos asked, what happens when a wolf who's never been denied decides he's owed something that doesn't belong to him? Torin turned, the alpha in him rising to the surface like steel drawn from its sheath. The gentleness he usually displayed melted away, replaced by a cold, unwavering resolve. Then I stopped giving warnings. Amos nodded once, satisfied. He knew what those words meant. Torin was prepared to use whatever force was necessary to protect Nymera, even if it meant breaking alliances and risking war. This wasn't just about pack politics anymore. It was about a personal threat to someone he loved. Good, because this isn't over. It's just the opening move. The field was alive with motion shouts, thuds of boots against dirt, and the sharp clack of sparring staffs resonated through the crisp morning air. The Joint Training Initiative, a supposed exercise in strengthening bonds between allied packs, had quickly transformed into something far more compelling. It had become her stage. Nymera stood at the center of it all, an undeniable figure of authority. Her silver training leathers, meticulously crafted for both mobility and protection, caught the golden rays of the sun, making her seem almost ethereal. Her long, intricately woven silver braid swung with a rhythmic, hypnotic grace as she moved, each step a testament to years of dedicated practice. She wasn't just commanding the soldiers, she was challenging them, pushing them beyond their perceived limits, teaching them subtle nuances of combat, and outmaneuvering them with an ease that bordered on the supernatural. And they respected her for it. Each member of the diverse group could feel the authenticity of her teaching, and it sparked a desire to learn and grow within them. Soldiers from 4 different packs, each distinguished by unique pack markings and subtle variations in their gear, lined up in formation, their eyes glued to Nymera. They hung on her every word, absorbing her knowledge like parched earth drinking rain. Even the cockiest, most seasoned warriors among them dared not interrupt her mid-instruction, sensing the profound respect she commanded. Again, Nymera barked, her voice clear and sharp, yet devoid of unnecessary harshness. Her eyes, the color of stormy seas, scanned the formation, missing nothing. If you leave your left side open like that, you may as well send your enemy an engraved invitation, complete with a map to your heart. A smattering of nervous laughter rippled through the ranks, easing the tension, but her point was made. A young Delta from Kane's pack, barely old enough to have earned his fangs, groaned, his face flushed a deep crimson as he retrieved his staff after being disarmed twice in under a minute. He was outmatched, but Nymera's gaze held no judgment, only encouragement. He stood back up, determined to improve. Kane watched from the sidelines, his arms folded across his chest, his jaw tight, the muscles in his neck visibly strained. He exuded an aura of barely controlled frustration, like a predator forced to observe from a distance. He had expected many things from the Luna polish, diplomacy, grace, perhaps even a carefully cultivated image of strength, but not this. Not this raw, unadulterated warrior fire. Not this commanding presence that turned heads and silenced dissent without her even trying. His gaze followed her every move with a complex blend of hunger and something darker, something akin to resentment. He craved the power she exuded, the respect she effortlessly commanded, and the way she shone so brightly. Torin, by contrast, was watching too, but from a greater distance, his posture radiating quiet pride, not possessiveness. He trusted her implicitly on the field, knew she was more than capable. He saw not a possession, but a partner, a warrior in her own right. That was the critical difference between the two alphas. Kane wanted to control her, Torin wanted to support her. Kane finally moved in, crossing the field with deliberate, calculated steps under the thin guise of observing the joint drills. A few apprehensive glances followed him, his reputation for ruthless ambition arriving before he did, but he walked with an air of unwavering confidence, as if he owned the very ground beneath his feet. "I didn't realize combat instruction was your strength, Luna," Kane said smoothly, his voice just loud enough for Nymera to hear as she finished demonstrating a devastating leg sweep that sent a heavy-set soldier crashing into the dirt with a muffled thud. The soldier, despite the fall, wore a sheepish grin, acknowledging the skill of the move. Nymera turned, wiping a bead of sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, not the least bit flustered by his interruption. "Surprised I can handle myself, Alpha Kane?" Her tone was even polite, yet held a subtle undercurrent of challenge. Kane tilted his head, offering a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, a practiced expression that felt hollow and insincere. Impressed, not surprised, though I confess, I expected such prowess to be curated. He took a step, closer, subtle, almost imperceptible, like a shadow lengthening in the afternoon sun. "Tell me, does Torin let you lead this part of the training, or did you decide to take the reins yourself?" There it was, the veiled dig. The thinly disguised attempt to imply that she needed permission, that her actions were subject to another's approval, the subtle assertion of male dominance. Nymera didn't blink. Her expression remained unchanged, a mask of polite indifference. "He doesn't let me do anything, Alpha Kane. I don't belong to him. I lead this because I'm better at it. And because this particular training initiative falls under my area of expertise, within the pack, in coordination with the other alphas, of course." The nearby soldiers pretended not to hear, but they did. Several of Kane's pack, particularly the younger wolves, exchanged quiet glances, a mixture of surprise and admiration in their eyes. They'd never seen anyone, let alone a Luna, speak to their alpha with such directness. Kane gave a short, humorless chuckle, but his eyes sharpened, betraying his irritation. So modest, a refreshing quality in a leader. She stepped closer, closing the space between them, lowering her voice to a near whisper. If you're looking to undermine Torn's authority by questioning mine, you're going to find it very lonely out here. Besides, I have yet to see you attempt a successful takedown of even the greenest member of my guard. Before he could respond, Torn approached, his timing impeccable, smooth and unforced, as if he'd been casually strolling by. Everything all right here? His voice was pleasant, but held a subtle warning, a silent promise of retribution. Kane didn't look away from Namera, his gaze locked on hers in a silent battle of wills. Perfectly. I was just admiring your Luna's leadership and the impressive skill of the soldiers under her command. Torrin smiled, just as sharp and knowing as his wife. Careful, Kane. Admiration starts in the eyes, but obsession ends with broken ribs, or worse. He placed a hand on Nymera's back, a possessive gesture that was also a clear declaration of unity. Nymera arched an elegant brow, her lips curving into a subtle, almost feline smile. And just to be clear, alpha connectioning is open to all. If you need a lesson, I'm happy to demonstrate again. This time with you as the volunteer. Her voice dripped with mock sweetness, a thinly veiled challenge. The tension on the field was thick enough to taste, palpable even to those who hadn't heard the exchange. The soldiers, though pretending to ignore the silent power struggle, were all acutely aware of the undercurrent swirling around them. Kane bowed slightly, his movements stiff and formal, polite on the surface, but seething underneath. I'll keep that in mind, Luna. But as he walked away, his shoulders tight, even his wolf growled beneath his skin, a low guttural sound of frustration and resentment. She'd outmaneuvered him again, and in front of an audience, no less. That sting, the humiliation of being publicly corrected, the reminder of his limitations in the face of her skill and competence, he wouldn't forget it. He would bide his time, waiting for an opportunity to even the score. This was far from over. He would make sure Nymera knew that. The conference room was too quiet for a gathering meant to foster peace. The air hung thick with unspoken agendas, like a predator waiting to strike. Nymera stood near the long polished table, its surface gleaming unnaturally in the dim light, her arms crossed like a shield, eyes fixed on the towering alpha who had once again invited her to talk privately. Kane closed the door behind him with a soft click. The sound echoed like a warning, amplified by the oppressive silence of the room. It was a sound meant to isolate, to intimidate. But Nymera stood her ground. You've made quite the impression on my warriors, he said, his voice a low, velvety rumble laced with a practiced charm. His eyes, the color of storm clouds, flickered over her with a predatory gleam. They've never seen a Luna take command the way you do. I can't decide if I'm more impressed or envious. Nymera didn't return his smile. The gesture felt like a violation, a sticky trap she refused to step into. Flattery doesn't work on me, Kane. Not when I know what it's trying to distract from. His eyes sparked with something uncomfortably close to amusement, a flicker of arrogance, barely concealed. Is that what you think I'm doing? Distracting you? She took a step forward, closing the distance between them, her spine ramrod straight, radiating an aura of calm composure that belied the simmering anger beneath. Let's stop pretending. You've been testing the boundaries of my patience, my position, and my relationship since the moment we met. I'm done ignoring it. Kane's smirk faltered, a momentary crack in his carefully constructed facade. He hadn't expected her to address it head on, preferring to play the game of subtle power plays and veiled intentions. I love Torn, Nymera continued, each word deliberate, each syllable a hammer blow against the fantasy he'd woven around her. He's not just my Metis, my equal. I chose him. I continue to choose him every day. Whatever fantasy you've created in your mind about use it ends now. His nostrils flared, a flash of primal anger betraying his carefully maintained composure. The muscles in his jaw tightened, and the storm clouds in his eyes darkened. You speak like he's worthy of you. The words were laced with disdain, a thinly veiled insult aimed at both Torin and her judgment. Nymera's voice dropped an octave, becoming a low, dangerous purr. And you speak like someone who doesn't know what no means? There was a beat of silence, thick with tension, broken only by the sound of her boots clicking against the polished floor as she stepped even closer, shoulder squared, chin high, daring him to deny her. You may be an alpha, Kane, but that doesn't entitle you to anything or everything, and especially not me, not my time, not even my attention. I will not justify my relationship to you. What neither of them noticed was that just outside the door, Torin and Amos had stopped mid-step. They'd been on their way to the meeting when Nymera's voice cut through the corridor clear, firm, furious. The sound had stopped them in their tracks. Amos started forward, his hand already reaching for the door handle, ready to defend Nymera at a moment's notice. But Torin held him back with one strong hand, his grip surprisingly firm. His jaw was tight, the line of his mouth a grim slash, but his eyes were lit with a quiet fire, a proud satisfaction that burned away any trace of defensiveness. He trusted Nymera to handle herself, and her words were a confirmation of that trust. Inside, Kane finally found his voice, though the forced lightness in it rang hollow. You've got spirit, I'll give you that. But I wonder, does he ever really see all of you? The fire under that calm? The ambition? He let the words hang in the air, a blatant attempt to sow seeds of doubt. Nymera didn't even blink. Her gaze remained unwavering, fixed on him with unwavering conviction. He sees all of me, loves all of me, which is why he doesn't try to manipulate, chase, or break me. He cherishes me for who I am, not who he wants me to be. Kane took a breath, the air hissing between his teeth, something sharp and dangerous flickering behind his eyes. The rejection stung, not because he truly desired her, but because his pride couldn't accept it. You think rejection makes me weak? No, it makes you unforgettable. Unforgettable is what you call the bruise after it's gone, she snapped, her lip curling with disdain. She wasn't impressed by his threats, nor by his warped perception of romance. Then, without waiting for another word, Nymera turned and walked past him, her movements fluid and graceful, a stark contrast to the turbulent emotions churning within the room. She was a force of nature, untamed and unbowed. When the door opened and she stepped out, she stopped, her heart skipping a beat as she came face to face with Torin and Amos. The air crackled with unspoken questions, with the aftermath of the confrontation they had inadvertently overheard. There was a beat of silence, thick with unspoken tension. Nymera could feel the weight of their gazes, the unspoken support radiating from them. Nymera met Torin's eyes, her own reflecting a mix of defiance and vulnerability, and said, without shame, I handled it. Torin cupped her cheek with a gentleness that almost trembled, his thumb brushing softly against her skin. I know you did. His voice was low, filled with pride and an overwhelming sense of love and respect. He knew her strength, her intelligence, and her unwavering loyalty. Behind her, Kane stood frozen in the room, a shadow outlined in arrogance and growing desperation. He watched them with narrowed eyes, his face a mask of barely suppressed fury. Amos glared at him over Nymera's shoulder, his expression dark in warning. That sounded like the last warning. Kane didn't answer. He couldn't, not without revealing the full extent of his ambition and his wounded pride. But inside, his obsession had shifted. It wasn't just an attraction anymore. The rejection had fueled something darker, something more dangerous. It was possession, a need to conquer what he couldn't have freely, a challenge to his authority, a declaration of war. The game had changed, and Kane was no longer playing for admiration. He was playing for control. The morning drills were meant to be simple pack-to-pack sparring to build camaraderie. But with Kane's wolves on the field, friendly had turned into fractured, a veneer barely concealing simmering animosity. The air crackled with unspoken challenges, a silent contest for dominance that had been escalating slowly for weeks. The sun was barely overhead, casting long, judgmental shadows across the training field when it happened. One of Kane's warriors, a cocky brute named Raynor, stepped into the sparring ring with Silverclaw's young beta in training, Lyra. She was sharp, skilled, and fast, a whirlwind of controlled movement but smaller, younger, her youthful eagerness a stark contrast to Raynor's seasoned aggression. Her silver fur gleamed under the morning sun, a beacon of Silverclaw pride. It should have been a standard match, a chance for Lyra to hone her skills against a more experienced opponent, a learning opportunity. Until it wasn't. Mid-spar, Raynor, fueled by something darker than healthy competition, employed a move that bordered on malicious. He swept Lyra's legs out from under her with unnecessary force, then slammed her to the ground with bone-jarring force after the whistle had blown, signaling the end of the round. A clear violation of both rules and decency, a calculated act of aggression masked as a clumsy mistake. His hand, calloused and cruel, pressed into her throat for a fraction too long enough to make the gathered wolves growl in outrage, a collective rumble of disapproval that echoed across the field. The scent of ozone hung heavy, a sign of suppressed power and barely contained fury. She scrambled up, clutching her shoulder, her face a mask of pain and fury. Fury burned in her wide, amber eyes, a potent mix that promised retribution. The unspoken message of the attack was clear: know your place. Nyxen, a whirlwind of protective instinct, was on her feet before anyone else, her hackles raised, teeth bared, but Amos beat her to the center of the ring, his movements a blur of focused energy. Fast, lethal, controlled. He moved with the quiet confidence of a predator, every step deliberate. He walked up to Raynor with ice in his step, his gaze a chilling promise. The air around him seemed to ripple with barely contained power. You call that training? Amos growled, his voice low and dangerous, standing nose to nose with the bigger wolf. Raynor towered over him, but Amos held his ground, radiating an aura of undeniable authority. Or, do you only fight girls you think won't hit back? Raynor opened his mouth to defend himself, a sputtering excuse already forming on his lips, but Amos didn't wait. He silenced him with a dismissive snarl. He turned slightly, addressing both Pakshi's voice cutting through the crowd like thunder, each word a carefully placed blow. This was a blatant violation of alliance terms. You don't injure someone after the match ends. You don't use force meant for enemies against allies. And you sure as hell don't lay hands on a Luna student. The unspoken implication hung heavy in the air. Lyra was under Nyxen's protection, and an attack on her was an attack on the pack itself. Kane arrived, finally, flanked by two of his betas, his expression unreadable, a carefully constructed mask of indifference. But Amos saw the flicker of anger in his eyes, the barely suppressed tension in his jaw. He knew Kane understood the gravity of the situation. Amos turned to him, his gaze unwavering. You gonna explain your wolf's behavior, or should I assume this is your idea of diplomacy? Raynor, emboldened by his alpha's presence, tried to speak again, to offer a carefully crafted lie. Amos silenced him with a raised finger, a gesture that spoke volumes about his authority. She was half your size, and you still went for the throat. That's not sparring, that's a message. One that's going to get answered if it happens again. The threat was clear, a promise of swift and decisive retribution. Kane's jaw flexed, a muscle ticking betrayingly. My pack doesn't answer to you. Amos took a step forward, closing the distance between them, just enough to make Kane's wolves bristle, the hairs on their backs standing on end. He held Kane's gaze unwavering, challenging him to take the next step. No, but right now, you're in our territory, under our alliance, during our training. And if you can't keep your warriors under control, we'll start assuming you want us to handle it for you. The subtext was unmistakable. Amos was willing to escalate the situation. Torn appeared beside Nyxen, a silent, imposing figure, quiet but radiating fury. His eyes narrowed and focused on Raynor. His presence was a visible reminder of the strength and loyalty that defined the Silverclaw pack. Nyxen stepped forward, her voice low and laced with steel. Raynor is banned from training sessions. If I see him on that field again, I'll assume he's volunteering to spar with me. The unspoken threat hung in the air, a promise of pain delivered with cold precision. Nyxen was a master of combat, and the thought of facing her in a sparring match sent a shiver down the spines of many wolves. Cain sneered, his composure cracking slightly. You think intimidation's going to solve this? No, Amos said, his voice calm but firm. But consequences might. The tension hung thick, a palpable weight in the air. But Cain, realizing he was outmatched, both rhetorically and physically, gave a tight nod to Raynor, a silent command. Raynor scowled, his face a mask of resentment, and stalked off with two of his packmates, their movements stiff with suppressed anger. Cain lingered just long enough to look at Nyxen, then at Amos, something like a threat behind his eyes, a glint of malice that promised future conflict. I'll deal with my pack. His tone was clipped, devoid of apology. Amos didn't smile. His expression remained impassive, his eyes cold. Do it fast, before we decide to deal with it for you. The Silver Claws had made themselves crystal clear. The message had been delivered, loud and brutally effective. Lines were no longer theoretical. They were drawn in the dirt bold and bloody, etched in disrespect and answered with the promise of violence. And the next time someone crossed them, it wouldn't end in a warning. The unspoken implication hung heavy in the air. Next time, the Silver Claws would draw blood. The alarm howls rose before Dawnlow, urgent, feral, not the calls of drills or training. These were warnings, primal and sharp, cutting through the pre-dawn stillness. A shiver of fear crawled down the spine, instinctive and unavoidable. Rogues. A pack of them, slipping through the North Ridge territory, jointly patrolled during the Alliance trials, a careless oversight, a moment of weakness exploited. They were fast-moving, driven by something desperate, which made them all the more dangerous. Ravenous wolves with nothing to lose. Torrin stood on the ridge, a silhouette against the paling sky, scanning the tree line with practiced ease. Nyxen was at his side, sword strapped across her back, its dark metal gleaming faintly. Her expression was grim but focused, a warrior's calm in the face of imminent battle. Cain arrived a breath later, his betas a step behind, already bristling for a fight. They were eager, almost reckless in their anticipation. You called in the big guns, he said, his voice laced with a mocking amusement as he eyed Nyxen. Appreciate the vote of confidence. Torrin didn't take the bait. He kept his gaze fixed on the trees. This isn't about pride. It's about protecting both packs. His voice was steady, devoid of emotion. I wasn't talking to you, Cain replied, his eyes still locked on Nyxen. A childish jab, a pathetic attempt to assert dominance. Nyxen narrowed her eyes, her expression hardening. Then you're already making mistakes. Her words were sharp, a subtle warning cutting through Cain's bravado. Before tension could build further, a Silverclaw scout appeared, blood on his sleeve, his face pale with fear. 3 rogues sighted just past the eastern bluff, moving fast. At least one of them has shifted fully. They're trying to flank us. Torrin turned to the group, his mind already calculating the optimal strategy. We split into 2 flanks. Amos, take 6 and circle wide. Cut them off from the south. I'll lead the second wave through the tree line, flush them out. Cain, I'll lead from the front. Cain interrupted, his voice booming with false confidence. They'll crumble if they see real strength. Show them who they're dealing with. Torrin's jaw tightened, his patience visibly fraying. We need to outmaneuver them, not charge in like bulls. This isn't about brute force. It's about minimizing casualties. Cain shrugged, dismissing Torrin's carefully considered plan with a flick of his wrist. You do it your way. I'll do it mine. He was already turning, his eyes blazing with a reckless ambition. And just like that, he broke formation, taking half his warriors with him straight into the trees. A headlong rush toward the enemy. A wave of anxiety washed over the remaining wolves. This was precisely the kind of impulsive decision they had come to expect from Cain, the kind that often led to unnecessary bloodshed. Nyxen moved toward Torrin, her eyes dark with concern. We can't leave him to his ego. His wolves aren't prepared for this kind of disorganized assault. They'll get slaughtered. I know, Torrin said, already shifting strategy in his head, his face etched with worry. But we can't babysit him either. We have to trust that his betas will keep him in check, even if I doubt they will. The fight was chaos, a maelstrom of teeth and claws and desperate snarls. The rogues weren't aimless rabble. They moved with a grim purpose, targeting patrol routes, stealing supplies, and fighting with the ferocity of cornered animals. They were trained, yes, but also starving, driven by desperation and a primal hunger. Kane's half-pack met them head-on, a collision of brute force against cunning strategy, and within minutes, it turned bloody. Kane was a fury on the field, ripping through one rogue after another, a whirlwind of fur and muscle and snarling rage. He seemed to revel in the violence, fueled by adrenaline and a desperate need to prove himself. He even tried to catch Nymera's eye whenever she appeared nearby, seeking her approval, her acknowledgement of his strength, but his recklessness was contagious, and it spread like wildfire through his ranks. His warriors followed his lead, breaking formation, charging instead of holding lines, sacrificing tactical advantage for the thrill of the kill. One of his younger wolves, Seth, barely more than a pup, didn't see the second rogue coming behind him. He was too caught up in the frenzy, too eager to impress his alpha, to notice the danger lurking in the shadows. Nymera saw Either Eyes miss nothing, but she was too far, unable to reach him in time. A silent curse escaped her lips. The rogue, a hulking brute with matted fur and crazed eyes, slammed Seth into a tree with brutal force. The sickening crack of bone echoed through the clearing. Before anyone could intervene, the rogue tore into Seth's side, ripping flesh and muscle. The young wolf's eyes widened in shock and pain, and then blankness. He was dead before his body hit the ground, a crumpled heap staining the earth crimson. The Silver Claws, fighting with coordinated precision, pushed back the remaining rogues, forcing a ragged retreat into the deeper woods. But the victory felt hollow, tainted by loss. Silence fell over the blood-stained clearing, a heavy, oppressive silence broken only by the ragged breathing of the survivors. The stench of blood and fear hung heavy in the air. Seth's body lay still, a stark reminder of the cost of Kane's recklessness. Kane knelt beside it, his hands covered in blood, not all of it his own. A flicker of something that might have been remorse crossed his face, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. His betas stood in a loose circle around him, their expressions a mixture of anger, grief, and disillusionment. They had followed him blindly for so long, trusting in his strength, his judgment. But now, doubt gnawed at their loyalty. "You broke formation," one growled, his voice low and dangerous. "You ignored Torrens' plan again. We could have handled this with fewer injuries if you had only listened." "I thought I could," Kane started, his voice defensive, his eyes darting nervously. "No," the beta snapped, his voice rising in anger. "You thought you were invincible. You thought you could win with brute strength alone. And now he's dead. Because of you." He pointed a trembling finger at Seth's lifeless body. Nymera stood at the edge of the clearing, watching silently, her expression unreadable. Her gaze wasn't filled with hatred or even anger. It was filled with profound disappointment. A deep well of sadness that cut deeper than any blade. Torrin arrived moments later, Amos beside him, his face tight with rage. Torrin, as always, sought to maintain his calm. "We will bury a wolf today," Amos said, his voice like stone, his eyes burning with accusation. "And the blood's on your hands, Kane. You wanted to play the hero, and now a young wolf is dead." Kane didn't answer. Couldn't. The weight of his failure pressed down on him, suffocating him. And this time, even his wolves didn't defend him. They stood in silence, their faces averted, their loyalty broken. Kane was still strong. Still feared by some, the first fracture had split down the middle of his pack, a gaping wound that threatened to tear his leadership asunder. The trust was gone, replaced by doubt and resentment, and they weren't looking at him like an alpha anymore. They were looking at him like a mistake. A reckless, arrogant mistake that had cost them one of their own. And doubt festered in their hearts about what other mistakes Kane might make. The air hadn't settled from the rogue attack when the second wave came crashing, insolent, calculated, and twice as vicious. They came from the south, hidden by the mist rising off the river. Nymera caught it first. Her head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. "This isn't over," she said, low and certain, her voice cutting through the lingering tension. Torin's attention shifted instantly, his gaze sweeping across the terrain with a practiced ease, dissecting the landscape like a general studying a war table. His eyes, usually alight with warmth, were now sharp and calculating. They waited, watched, sent the first wave to rattle us. His voice was calm, analytical, betraying none of the adrenaline that still coursed through him. "And we just rattled Kane," Amos muttered, eyes sharp, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. "Great." But Nymera's voice was calm and clipped, the voice of a leader who knew exactly what needed to be done. "We split clean. Keep the pressure tight. Hold position and push through the center. Use the mist to force them into the rocks." Torin nodded once, a subtle acknowledgement of her strategy. "Amos, take your flank wide. Create a choke point between the ridge. Use the terrain to your advantage." He paused, his eyes meeting Amos's. "Hold that line, no matter what." He then turned to Nymera, his expression softening slightly, a hint of admiration flickering in his eyes. "Nymera, with me. Let's finish this." The Silverclaws moved like a single living creature, responding to Torin's directives with seamless precision. They were a pack, forged in loyalty and battle, and they moved as one. Amos's unit vanished into the rocks, their understanding of the terrain giving them an almost preternatural advantage. Torin and Nymera led their line straight into the oncoming rogues, blades drawn, teeth bared in a silent promise of retribution. Torin moved with a fluid grace that belied his size, his silver blade a blur of deadly precision. He cut down rogues with clinical efficiency, each strike aimed to disable, not just kill, demonstrating his calculated approach to warfare. This Tamino chaos. No ego, just precise execution of a meticulous plan. Precision, unity, power. Nymera struck like silver lightning, flipping one rogue off his feet with a fluid, practiced sweep and slashing another across the ribs in the same motion. Her soldiers flanked her instinctively, trusting her leadership without hesitation. They anticipated her moves, filled the gaps in her defenses, and fought as an extension of her will. She was their Luna, but in that moment, on that battlefield, she was their commander, and they followed her with absolute faith. Kane's wolves, those who had followed him blindly just hours before, watched from the edge, stunned into silence. Their barks and jeers were replaced by an uneasy quiet, their eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and dawning realization. They saw something they had never witnessed under Kane's command, a coordinated, disciplined force working together as a cohesive unit. They saw Torin coordinating without barking meaningless orders, offering concise, tactical instructions that were instantly understood and executed. He moved among his warriors, offering words of encouragement, adjusting formations, and ensuring that every member of his pack was fighting at their best. His presence was a calming influence, a reassurance that they were under control. They saw Nymera bleeding from a shallow gash on her arm and still giving orders, her voice unwavering, her focus unwavering. Her commitment was infectious, inspiring her warriors to fight harder, to push past their limits. She led from the front, not from behind, demonstrating her willingness to share in their pain and sacrifice. They saw Amos take a hit to protect the junior warrior, shielding him from a crushing blow and keep the formation steady, sacrificing himself for the good of his pack, showing a valor that resonated deep within their primal souls. They saw discipline forged in mutual respect, loyalty earned, not demanded through intimidation. And suddenly, Kane's force didn't look like a pack anymore. It looked like scattered dogs, waiting to be told what to do, lost and uncertain, without a strong hand to guide them. They had been trained to obey, not to think, and now, faced with true leadership, they were paralyzed by indecision. One of Kane's betas stepped toward him mid-battle, his eyes tracking Nymera as she helped lift a fallen soldier back to her feet, displaying a compassion that was foreign to Kane's brutal regime. "She listens," the beta said quietly, his voice laced with a newfound respect. "And they listened to her." Kane said nothing, his hands clenched so hard his nails dug into his palms, drawing blood. He felt a cold knot forming in his stomach, a fear that was more potent than any he had ever known. He was losing control, and he knew it. The last rogue fell to the dirt, slain by Torin's relentless assault, and a hush swept the clearing, broken only by the labored breathing of tired warriors and the sting of minor wounds. The silence was heavy with the weight of victory, but also with the dawning awareness of a power shift. Nymera stepped forward, pulling her silver-tinted blade from her belt and sliding it clean into its sheath with a soldier's pride, not a showgirl's flourish. The motion was economical and precise, a clear indication of her practicality and dedication to her role as a protector. "We'll burn the body," she said, her voice clear and authoritative. "Keep the rot out of the forest." Torin nodded, his gaze meeting hers, a silent communication passing between them. "We leave no trace for others to follow. We will protect our territory, no matter the cost." Kane finally moved, stepping toward the group. His wolves followed slowly, hesitant, eyes shifting toward Nymera and Torin, searching for a sign, a direction, something to cling to in the face of their crumbling allegiance. Their loyalty was being tested, their faith shaken, and they were struggling to reconcile what they had always known with the truth they were now witnessing. Not him. They weren't looking at him. Kane's gaze locked with Nymera's, his eyes narrowed, searching for a weakness, a flaw, anything to justify his dismissive assessment of her. "You're not what I expected." He spat the words out like venom, trying to regain some semblance of control. Nymera didn't blink, her eyes unwavering, her stance unyielding. "You expected Aluna to be ornamental. That was your first mistake." Her words were a challenge, a confrontation of his preconceived notions and biases. He smirked, a cynical expression that failed to mask the flicker of something between frustration and admiration. He was begrudgingly acknowledging her competence, her strength, and he was struggling to reconcile it with his ego. "Maybe you need someone who can match you." He tested the waters, probing for an opening, a vulnerability. "I already have him," she said flatly, nodding toward Torin, her voice devoid of any ambiguity. Her loyalty to Torin was absolute, unwavering, and she did not attempt to hide it. Kane's jaw flexed, his face contorting with a primal jealousy. "Then maybe he doesn't deserve you." He was attempting to sow discord, to undermine their bond, to exploit any potential weakness. That earned a growl from Amos and a few of the Silverclaws, a clear indication of their protective instincts and their unwavering loyalty to Torin. They saw Kane's words as a personal affront, a challenge to their pack, and they were ready to defend their leader. Nymera stepped closer, her voice low but lethal. "If you keep talking like this, Kane, you'll force everyone here to take a closer look at your worth. And I won't be gentle when I speak the truth." Her words were a threat, a promise of exposure, a clear warning that she would not hesitate to tear down his facade if he continued to disrespect her and her pack. Kane's beta stiffened, clearly torn between his loyalty to his alpha and the growing respect he felt for Nymera. He glanced between Nymera and his alpha, then finally muttered under his breath, just loud enough for Kane to hear, "Maybe it's time you stopped trying to dominate every room and started hearing the ones who earn it." Kane's expression cracked, just slightly, a subtle flicker of doubt, a hint of vulnerability that he had never shown before. He didn't respond, unable to find a suitable retort, his usual confidence shattered by the weight of his beta's words. He turned and walked away, but for the first time he wasn't being followed like a leader. He was alone, his authority diminished, his influence waning. Kane didn't answer. He just turned away, defeated by the weight of his inadequacy. He knew that he had failed, that he had underestimated Nymera and Torin, and that he was now facing the consequences of his arrogance. But as he walked, his wolves weren't at his heels the way they used to be. Their pace lagged, their enthusiasm gone, their loyalty wavering. They lagged behind, way behind, watching Nymera, appraising her strength, her confidence, and her unwavering dedication to her pack. Watching Torin, respecting his tactical skill, his calm demeanor, and his ability to inspire loyalty. And seeing leadership they'd never been given, a style of leadership that was based on respect, trust, and mutual sacrifice, a stark contrast to the fear and intimidation that had always been Kane's tools. They were witnessing a new way of leading, a way that resonated deep within their souls, and they were longing for it. The battlefield was a canvas of quiet devastation. Silverclaws, their movements precise and somber, moved in small, efficient units. Some tended to the wounded, their healing magic a soft, green glow against the grim backdrop. Others worked with grim determination, burning the bodies of the rogue wolves in controlled lines of fire. The air was thick with the acrid stench of blood, smoke, and the sickeningly sweet smell of scorched fur, a morbid perfume clinging to everything. Nymera stood beside Torin, her arms crossed, a silent testament to her unwavering strength. She watched as the last of the flames devoured the carcasses, turning them to ash and bone. Her usually vibrant hair was tied back, streaked with soot and ash, a stark visual reminder of the battle's intensity. Her tunic was torn at one shoulder, revealing a glimpse of scarred flesh, but even with these visible wounds, she stood tall, unbent, unbreakable. "They won't try again soon," she said, her voice firm, a low rumble that cut through the quiet crackle of the dying embers. "We made sure of that." Torin nodded, his agreement barely audible. He didn't answer right away, his gaze distant and unfocused, lost in the aftermath of the fight. His mind was already replaying the battle, analyzing the tactics, dissecting the movements of both sides. But something else gnawed at him, a disquieting feeling he couldn't quite shake. Kane. It wasn't just his celebrated recklessness, the wild abandon that usually marked his fighting style. It was his timing, his almost unnatural eagerness to engage, his suspicious proximity to the initial point of attack. All of it felt staged. Nymera, ever perceptive, noticed the shift in Torin's demeanor, the tightening of his jaw, the clouding of his eyes. "You're thinking what I'm thinking," she stated, her tone laced with a hint of dread. "I'm trying not to," he admitted, his voice low and grave, the words hanging heavy in the smoky air. Elsewhere, Amos wasn't trying to avoid any thoughts, no matter how uncomfortable. He was chasing them, relentless in his pursuit of the disturbing truth. He had doubled back toward the eastern ridge after the fight, ignoring the exhaustion that tugged at his muscles and the ache in his bones. Instincts, honed by years of border patrol and unwavering loyalty, gnawed at him, whispering suspicions he couldn't ignore. That part of the border had always been the weakest, the most vulnerable, and it had conveniently gone unwatched during the attack. Too conveniently. It was there, hidden beneath a scatter of upturned brush, disturbed earth, and scattered leaves, that he found the evidence, subtle yet damning. Discarded raw meat, left near the trees, fresh, barely touched, not scavenged, but purposefully placed, a blatant offering. A scent trail leading back north, not from the rogues, whose path of destruction was clear and distinct, but from a single wolf, a familiar scent, masked but recognizable to his keen nose. And finally, a shredded piece of fabric, black leather, with a faint, almost imperceptible mark, the distinctive curve of Kane's pack crest, partially torn but still discernible beneath the grime. Amos lifted it, his scowl deepening, his eyes narrowing with a mixture of anger and disgust. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture more disturbing than he had imagined. "This wasn't just sloppy," he growled, the words barely a murmur, lost in the stillness of the forest. "This was planned, deliberate." By nightfall, he was back at camp, the evidence clutched in his hand like a physical manifestation of his growing suspicion. The temporary truce fire flickered in the center clearing, casting dancing shadows on the faces of the weary wolves. Pack members from both sides were eating in strained silence, tending to their wounds, offering cautious words of comfort, and pretending that things were fine, that the fragile piece wouldn't shatter into a million pieces. Torin sat at the edge of the clearing, away from the forced camaraderie, sharpening his blade with slow, deliberate strokes. The metallic rasp of the sharpening stone filled the air, a constant reminder of the violence they had all endured. Amos approached, silent and grim-faced, his presence radiating a sense of urgency that cut through the forced tranquility. He stood beside Torin, his shadow falling across the Alpha's face. "We've got a problem," he said simply, his voice devoid of all emotion, and dropped the leather strip onto Torin's knee. Torin studied it, his expression unreadable at first. He turned the scrap of leather over in his hands, examining the torn edges, the faint markings, the undeniable evidence. Then his head snapped up, his eyes locking with Amos's. his gaze sharp and questioning. I found a bait trail, Amos added, his voice low and controlled, betraying none of the turmoil he felt inside. Deliberate, leading right into the rogue's path. Not from them, from one of us. Someone from Kane's pack. Nymera, who had been nearby, supervising the distribution of rations, froze, her body rigid, her eyes widening with disbelief and mounting horror. He fed them, lured them, maybe not directly, Amos said, hedging slightly, unwilling to make accusations he couldn't definitively prove, but someone helped them target the gap. Someone knew exactly where to strike to cause the most chaos, and that someone knew it'd pull attention away from the western flank where Nymera would be positioned. Alone, Torin's fingers clenched around the strip of leather, the knuckles white with barely suppressed rage. You think Kane orchestrated the attack? Amos gave a grim smile, devoid of humor or warmth. No, I know he did. Nymera exhaled slowly, her breath catching in her throat, her voice like ice, each word carefully chosen, laced with a chilling clarity. To play hero, to get close, to finally impress them, to prove to them that he is worthy of their affection, or to put you in danger, Torin said darkly, his voice a low growl that resonated with barely contained fury, just so he could swoop in like a savior. To prove his worth by highlighting your weakness. The firelight flickered across their faces, highlighting the stark emotions etched into every line and curve. Rage, realization, betrayal. The truth had been exposed, and it tasted like ash in their mouths. Across the camp, Kane stood near his wolves, his posture relaxed, but his eyes were sharp and watchful. He noticed the subtle shift in the atmosphere, the way Nymera and Torin looked his way, their gazes burning with a mixture of accusation and contempt. He saw Amos's stiff shoulders, the purposeful stride, and the way the other wolf avoided his gaze. His instincts, ruthless and primal, honed by years of scheming and manipulation, told him he was being hunted now. The hunter had become the prey. He smirked, a cruel, self-assured expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. He knew he had been exposed, but he was ready. Let them come. Let her come. He still believed she'd choose him eventually. He still clung to the hope that she would see the brilliance of his plan, the lengths he was willing to go to for her attention, for her love. He was convinced that in the end, she would see that he was the only one who truly understood her, the only one who was worthy of her. And when she did, all of this would have been worth it. The morning sun sliced across the training field, a golden blade dividing the silver claws, sharp and proud in their ordered ranks, from Kane's pack, huddled to the side, unsure of their place. Were they guests? Allies? Or something far more precarious? Weapons gleamed in the sun, reflecting the tension that thickened the air. Across the packed earth strode Torin and Amos, each footfall deliberate, each movement radiating purpose. Heads turned, whispers rippled, carrying unease on the cool morning breeze. Kane stood at the edge of his pack, arms folded, a forced nonchalance etched on his face. Beside him stood Nymera, her stance radiating a glacial indifference, her eyes fixed on the silver claws. She hadn't acknowledged Kane's presence once. She was a warrior today, clad in her practical training leathers, her long braid pulled tight. She led the Silverclaw formations through their stretches, her movements fluid and lethal, a stark contrast to the chaos about to erupt. Amos's voice cracked through the air, sharp and authoritative. "Silverclaw shout!" The soldiers froze mid-movement, a tableau of disciplined obedience. Nymera didn't turn, but her voice, cool and clear, carried across the silent field. Fall still. The entire training ground fell silent, the usual sounds of metallic, clinking and muffled whispers replaced by the sigh of the wind. It was a stillness pregnant with anticipation, the calm before the storm. Torin stepped forward, his gaze locked on Kane. Kane! One name, heavy with accusation, hung in the air, enough to stop the heart of any wolf with a conscience. Kane tilted his head, feigning a relaxed demeanor. "Alpha Torin, you joining the morning drill, or just inspecting the talent?" Nymera finally turned, her expression a mask of pure command. Her chin was lifted, her eyes hard, unyielding. "We're not here to drill, Kane. We're here to speak the truth." Kane's forced smile flickered, betraying the unease that gnawed at him. "About you," Nymera continued, her voice unwavering, "and what you've done." A collective murmur swept through both packs. Unease rippled through Kane's wolves as their bewildered eyes shifted between Kane and the imposing figures of the Silverclaw leadership. One of his betas stepped forward, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What's going on?" Amos held up a strip of torn leather, the faint, lingering scent of meat, barely masked by the morning air. "This was found near the first rogue wave, used to bait them in. It carries the scent of Kane's pack, not a rogue's." "Yours." Kane scoffed, attempting to dismiss the evidence with a wave of his hand. "That's a hell of a leap, even for you." But Nymera's voice, amplified by the silent tension, cut through his denial. "A young wolf died during that fight, your pack member, following your orders. Orders that were meant to put me in danger, just so you could play the hero." She took a step closer, her gaze unwavering, piercing through his carefully constructed facade. "You orchestrated a rogue attack on neutral ground, put lives at risk, broke the code of the wolves. All for what? To chase something that was never yours to begin with?" Gasps rippled through the ranks. Low growls rumbled among the Silverclaws. Kane's wolves stared at him, a mixture of horror and disbelief dawning in their eyes. "You're lying," Kane said too quickly, his voice betraying his desperation. "You don't have proof." "I don't need more proof, Kane," Nymera snapped, her voice laced with contempt. "I have the results. You manipulated a threat to try to earn me like some prize, and one of your own died for it. Is that what leadership means to you? Is that the kind of alpha you are?" One of Kane's younger wolves, barely more than 18, his face still holding the softness of youth, stepped forward, his voice trembling with grief and betrayal. "Seth was my brother. He followed you because he believed in you." Kane finally looked at the boy, and for a fleeting moment, the hardened facade cracked. The heat drained from his expression, and for a second, just a second, he looked like he might shatter. But pride, that insidious poison, wouldn't let him. "Get over it," Kane snarled, his voice regaining its harsh edge. "This is war. Losses happen." That callous disregard was the final nail in the coffin. The shocked gasps turned to low, menacing growls. Kane's own beta, a wolf who had been loyal for years, stepped away from him, his face etched with disgust. "You've lost your mind, Kane," the beta said, his voice low and dangerous. "You used us, all of us, for your obsession, Seth. Trusted you." Nymera stood tall between both packs, a figure of unwavering strength, her voice cutting through the rising tide of anger. "Let this be heard by every wolf here. I am the Luna of the Silverclaw pack. I stand with Alpha Tauren, my mate, my equal, and my choice. Any challenge to that bond is an attack on our pack itself." She turned her steel gray eyes on Kane, stripping away his illusions with a single potent glare. "You don't love me, Kane. You don't even see me. You only see what you want. And I am not yours." Silence descended once more, heavier than before, laden with unspoken truths and broken loyalties. Then Torn stepped forward, his voice calm and composed, but carrying an undercurrent of deadly warning. "You're lucky this isn't a battlefield, Kane, because if it were, you wouldn't be standing now," Amos added, his voice cold and dismissive. "Leave. You're no longer welcome here." For a long moment, Kane didn't move, his face a mask of barely contained fury and humiliation. He was exposed, his ambition laid bare, his pack turning away in disgust. Then, finally silently, he turned and walked away. His shoulders were slumped, his steps heavy with defeat. The grand manipulator, the charming rogue, reduced to a pariah. No one followed. The silence that remained was deafening, a testament to the power of truth and the devastating consequences of betrayal. The sun, now higher in the sky, painted the clearing in warmer light, softening the harsh edges of the previous day. Though the tension hadn't fully dissipated, a quiet, reflective mood had settled over the Silverclaw camp. Wolves moved with a gentler purpose, tending to the injured, sharing quiet words of comfort and remembrance, the air thick with unspoken grief. In a corner of the camp, near a sputtering fire, a small group huddled. Elias, Seth's brother, stood at the center. Grief etched deep lines around his eyes, but a newfound steel shone beneath, a resolution forged in the fires of loss. He radiated a raw, determined energy. Torin, his face softened by compassion, stood nearby, his hand resting on the hilt of his sheathed blade. Amos stood silently beside him, arms crossed, his usual stern gaze tempered with understanding. They watched Elias, these two seasoned warriors, their hearts heavy with the weight of responsibility. Elias's voice, though carrying a tremor of emotion, cut through the quiet. "I want to join the Silverclaw pack." Torin regarded him with a patient, knowing look. "Elias," he began, his voice gentle but firm, "joining us isn't a whim or a way to escape your grief. It's a life-altering pledge. It demands everything: your heart, your loyalty, your very lifeblood." Amos stepped forward, his voice surprisingly soft. "We don't offer easy answers, pup. We don't tolerate betrayal. You must bleed for this pack. Be willing to lay down everything for a survival to wear the Silverclaw colors." Elias swallowed hard, locking his gaze with Torin's unwavering despite the tears welling in his eyes. "I know, and I'm ready. If I can't give you everything, then I'll walk away. I'll leave with Kane's memory. But I want to be better than what he became. I want to build something strong, something lasting, something good." Nyxen approached, her presence radiating warmth and strength. She stepped into the small circle, her gaze meeting each wolf's with empathetic understanding. "Silverclaw loyalty isn't about blindly following orders," she said, her voice a soothing balm. "It's about standing together, shoulder to shoulder, through battle and peace, through moments of anger and moments of healing. It's about family." She reached out and gently placed a hand on Elias's shoulder, her touch a silent promise. "We will guide you, Elias. We will teach you what true loyalty means, show you the strength within yourself, and help you heal." A few of Kane's former pack members lingered at the edges of the scene, their faces etched with a mixture of hope and suspicion. An older wolf, his face a roadmap of battles fought and losses endured, stepped forward, his voice rough with hesitation. "I fought beside Kane for years. I don't know if I can trust you all yet. He led us, protected us." Torin met his gaze, his own unwavering and filled with understanding. "Trust is earned, old wolf. But so is redemption. We don't ask you to forget Kane or betray your past loyalty. We ask you to earn a new one with us. If you want to stay, you prove it with your actions, your unwavering commitment. If not, you are free to leave. No hard feelings." He paused, his voice gaining a sharper edge. "But understand this: if you join, you give everything, or you walk away now." The older wolf nodded slowly, his eyes searching Torin's. "I'm willing to try." As the afternoon deepened, Silverclaw wolves mingled with those who had once been Kane's pack. They shared food, told stories, some of shared loss, others of hope for the future, and offered quiet gestures of comfort. The laughter, though tentative at first, grew bolder, more genuine. There was no erasing the past, no forgetting the bloodshed, but from the ashes of grief, something new began to blossom. The first fragile tendrils of trust, acceptance, and a sense of belonging. The spark of new loyalty flickered in their eyes. Torin caught Nyxen's eye across the flickering campfire, a faint, hopeful smile tugging at his lip. She returned it, her eyes shining with resolve, a silent vow exchanged between mates and leaders, a promise to guide their pack towards a brighter future, together. Night had fallen softly over the camp, painting the world in shades of deep blue and silver. The crackle of the dying fire was the only sound, accompanied by the distant hoot of an owl and the rustling of restless leaves. Nyxen sat on a fallen log near the edge of the clearing, her gaze lifted toward the stars. The cool night air brushed against her skin, calming yet alive with the scent of pine and earth. A deep weariness settled in her bones, but the sight of the familiar constellations offered a small measure of solace. Torin approached quietly, hands tucked into the pockets of his packed jacket. He settled beside her, close but not crowding, letting the silence speak for a moment. He mirrored her gaze towards the heavens, his presence a warm, solid anchor beside her. "You seem miles away," he said softly, his voice a low rumble that blended with the night sounds. Nyxen smiled, a small, tired curve of her lips. "Just thinking. About everything." She shifted slightly, leaning into his side. "About how much has changed and how much hasn't." He nodded. "We've been through a storm." He reached up and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, his touch lingering for a moment. "And it's not over yet," she added. Her voice held a steady strength, but underneath it, a flicker of vulnerability. "Kane, his obsession, it could have destroyed us, destroyed me." Torrin shifted and took her hand in his. His grip was firm, reassuring. "It didn't, because you stood your ground. You are strong." Her eyes found his, searching. "Did I? Sometimes I wonder if I was too hard on him, if maybe there was a part of him worth saving." Torrin's gaze grew serious. "Maybe, but not at the cost of us. You made the right call. You protected our pack, and you protected yourself. That takes courage, Nyxen." He paused, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of her hand. "He wanted us to doubt each other, to question where our loyalties lie, to make us mistrust the bond we share. That's how he thought he could control us." She squeezed his hand. "I felt that manipulation. He wanted me to question you, to see you as a threat, but I never could. And you? How are you holding up?" He let out a low breath, a wolf sigh. "Angry, protective, proud of you. But I'm tired too. Fighting on all fronts isn't easy." He paused, then added, "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself and our pack." Nyxen laughed softly. "I agree. It's not easy. You're steady and strong like the ground beneath my feet." She leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him. "I always trusted you, Torrin, even when Kane tried to make me doubt everything. And I love that you trust me." He grinned. "That's the plan." He turned his head and pressed a soft kiss to her temple. They sat close then, hands still linked, drawing strength from the quiet. The world beyond the firelight felt wild and uncertain, but here, together, they found peace. The silent understanding that passed between them was a language all their own. The simple act of holding hands spoke volumes. Nyxen's voice dropped to a whisper. "Whatever comes next, we face it side by side." She rested her head against his shoulder, breathing in his scent like a memory she could hold on to. "I never stopped trusting you, Torrin, even when Kane did everything to shake me. And I love that you trust me back." She rested her head against his shoulder, breathing in his scent like a memory she could hold on to. "I never stopped trusting you, Torrin, even when Kane did everything to shake me. And I love that you trust me back." A throat cleared at a respectful distance. Nyxen straightened just as Amos stepped into view, eyes downcast but tense with urgency. "Alpha, Luna, sorry to interrupt," he said, dipping his head. "But the Alliance Council has sent word. They've called in all the packs. An emergency convocation. Every Alpha is expected to appear." Torrin's body went still, the quiet between them shattered like glass. "There's more," Amos added, voice lower now. "One of the council members specifically requested the Silver Claws address them directly. Word of the rogue skirmish has reached their ears. They want a full account. How it started, how it ended, and why it happened on our borders." Nyxen's eyes narrowed. "They think we provoked it?" Amos didn't answer right away, but the look in his eyes said enough. Torrin stood, the weight of leadership sliding back onto his shoulders like armor. "Then we give them the truth. All of it." The Alliance Council, a tapestry of fur and shadow, convened in the heart of the ancient redwood grove. The air hung thick with unspoken judgments, each rustle of leaves a whispered accusation. Elders and alphas from a dozen packs formed a silent ring beneath the colossal tree, its presence a constant reminder of the enduring laws they had sworn to uphold. Their faces, etched with years of responsibility and hard-won wisdom, were impassive, betraying nothing of the turmoil that churned beneath the surface. In the heart of the circle stood Kane, a lone figure radiating defiance. His arms were crossed tightly, a shield against the waves of disapproval that crashed against him. His jaw was clenched, a visible struggle to contain the storm raging within. Even from across the clearing, Nymera could feel the heat of his anger, the desperate energy of a cornered animal. Behind Cain, a stark contrast stood Jarek, his beta. Loyalty warred with disillusionment on his face, the conflict hardening his features into a mask of grim resignation. He stood as a buffer, a final line of defense, but his shoulders were slumped, his eyes downcast, already acknowledging the inevitable. To Cain's left, his pack huddled, a mixture of fear and uncertainty in their eyes, their allegiance shaken by the revelations of their alpha's actions. Across the circle, the Silver Claws stood united. Torin, his face a granite mask, emanated an aura of implacable justice. Beside him, Amos, ever pragmatic, observed with quiet intensity. And closest to Cain, Nymera, Luna of the Silver Claws, her presence radiating both strength and sorrow. She was the diplomat, the bridge builder, and it was her role to speak the truth, even when it was a blade that cut deep. Her cloak billowed slightly as she stepped forward, breaking the oppressive silence. Her voice, though calm and carefully measured, resonated with authority. Cain used a fabricated rogue threat to sow discord and create chaos within the Alliance. His motives were not strategic, but deeply personal, driven by selfish desire. This was not merely a miscalculation, but a direct threat to the stability of this alliance and the safety of its members. She paused, letting her words sink in. A young wolf is dead because of his obsession, and we will not insult this council, nor the memory of the fallen, by pretending this was anything less than a cold, calculated betrayal. A ripple of murmurs swept through the assembled packs, a low hum of discontent that amplified the gravity of Nymera's pronouncement. The elders shifted uneasily, their eyes flickering between Cain and the Silver Claws, weighing the evidence, measuring the cost. Cain's head snapped up, his eyes burning with wounded fury as they locked onto Nymera. You think you're so righteous, Silverclaw? You think you've never bent the rules, never used your power to get what you want? His voice dripped with scorn, a desperate attempt to deflect the blame, to drag her down to his level. Torin stepped forward, his presence radiating raw power. His voice, low and steady, cut through Cain's outbursts like a shard of ice. I want only what belongs to me. My mate, my pack, my honor. You, Cain, wanted what was never yours to take. You stole it in the shadows, and you bled your own. Jarek shifted uncomfortably behind Cain, his face etched with shame. He stepped to Cain's side, a silent plea in his eyes. He knew their alpha was spiraling. Finally, he spoke, his voice thick with sorrow rather than strength. We stand with our pack, Cain. We always have, but we cannot stand this. Not with lies spun as truth. Not with obsession disguised as strategy. You acted without counsel, without honor, and we, the pack, have paid the price. A long, heavy silence descended upon the council, broken only by the rustling of leaves in the wind. The weight of Jarek's words hung in the air, a damning indictment from within Cain's ranks. Then, Orel, one of Cain's elders, a veteran with a gray-muzzled snout and eyes that had witnessed generations of pack life, stepped forward. His staff thudded softly on the mossy ground with each measured step, a somber drumbeat announcing his pronouncement. We do not wish to sever the alliance. We understand the strength Silverclaw brings, and value Luna Nymera's wisdom and diplomacy. However, Cain must answer for what he has done. His actions have threatened the very foundation of our unity. Torin nodded once, his gaze unwavering. Then let's cease the charade. He must face exile or abdicate. But the alliance cannot, will not, hold if he remains alpha. Too much trust has been broken. Cain's eyes widened, but it wasn't surprise that flickered within them. It was pure, unadulterated rage. You would strip me of my pack, my birthright? You will snatch away everything I've worked for, all because I saw something worth wanting? His voice rose in pitch, laced with disbelief and a growing sense of betrayal. Amos didn't even blink. His voice was devoid of emotion, a cold dismissal of Kane's self-pity. No, Kane. We remove you because you destroyed something worth protecting. You broke the trust between packs, shattered the foundation of our alliance, and sacrificed innocent lives for your own selfish desires. More murmurs rippled through the council. Heads nodded in agreement, voices rising in support. The tide had turned. Kane was alone, adrift on a sea of disapproval. Aurel turned toward Kane slowly, his eyes filled with a deep sadness. You have brought shame to our name. You have cost us lives, trust, and threatened the very existence of our alliance. He addressed the council, his voice resonating with finality. Therefore, following ancient law and by the unanimous consent of this council, we will remove Kane from leadership, effective immediately. His title is forfeit. His position as Alpha is revoked. Kane's control shattered. The words were a physical blow, stripping bare his identity, his purpose. A guttural roar ripped from his throat, a sound less of language and more of pure, unbridled rage. He surged forward, muscles coiling and uncoiling with explosive force. Jarek, anticipating the move, tried to intercept, but Kane was too fast, too fueled by desperate fury. He shoved Jarek aside with brutal force, the impact sending the larger wolf stumbling. Ignoring Jarek, Kane locked his sights on Oral. He moved with a speed that belied his size, a snarling brown blur of fury. In a heartbeat, he was upon Oral, knocking the older wolf off his feet. Aurel landed hard, the air whooshing from his lungs. Before he could even register what was happening, Kane was on top of him, pinning him to the earth with heavy paws, teeth bared just inches from Aurel's throat. The scent of fear, sharp and acrid, filled Kane's nostrils, fueling his rage. This was it. He would silence the traitor, reclaim his power, even if it meant staining his paws with blood. But as Kane tensed, ready to deliver the killing blow, a new shadow fell across him. A low growl, deeper and more menacing than his own, vibrated through the ground. Torin. He stood like a statue, his eyes burning with a cold, unwavering light. He moved with unsettling speed, closing the distance between himself and Kane in a handful of silent strides. Kane, momentarily distracted, glanced up. He barely had time to register the look in Torin's eyes, a terrifying blend of disgust and grim determination, before Torin launched himself. Torin struck with the force of a battering ram. He didn't bite, didn't claw. Instead, he slammed his shoulder into Kane's side, hitting him with a bone-jarring impact. The force of the blow lifted Kane off Aurel and sent him sprawling. He landed heavily, a pained grunt escaping his lips. But Torin wasn't finished. Before Kane could regain his bearings, Torin was upon him again. This time he targeted Kane's leg, delivering a precise, brutal kick that shattered bone. A howl of agony ripped from Kane's throat as his leg buckled beneath him. He tried to drag himself away, but Torin was relentless. With a final, decisive move, Torin positioned himself behind Kane and with one swift, powerful motion, snapped his spine. The sound was sickeningly loud in the clearing. Kane went limp, his body convulsing once, then still. Silence descended, broken only by the heavy breathing of the gathered wolves. Torin stood over Kane's lifeless form, his chest heaving. The air crackled with unspoken tension. No one dared to speak. And then Amos stepped forward, eyes sweeping the gathered alphas, then turned to stand beside Torin. Nymera moved with him, flanking Torin's other side. The three of them stood shoulder to shoulder, Alpha, Luna, and Second, a wall of resolve. Behind them, the Silverclaw pack rose as one. No signal was needed, no words. They simply moved, forming a line behind their leaders like a living shield. Loyalty made flesh, strength forged in trust. And Kane's pack, scattered and stunned, saw what true unity looked like. Finally, Torin spoke. His voice was low, gravel dragged across stone. He left me no choice. He nearly fractured the alliance with his ambition. His rage threatened everything we've worked to protect. This wasn't vengeance. It was necessity. He looked across the circle, his gaze finding Aurel. The hardness in his eyes faded, just a little. He would have killed you. Aurel held his gaze for a long moment, jaw tight with the weight of everything left unspoken. Then he stepped forward, slowly, the tension in his shoulders visible, but so was the sincerity in his voice. "I know," Aurel said quietly, "and I won't forget it." He inclined his head, a gesture of respect that carried more weight than a bow. "I owe you my life, Alpha Tauren, and the lives of my wolves. If there's a debt to be paid, I'll pay it." It wasn't just gratitude, it was a quiet offering. A bridge, maybe. The first stone was laid towards something more than just survival. Tauren gave a single nod. Not a smile, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. Silence followed his words. Not empty silence waited. For a moment, the forest itself seemed to hold its breath for. As the council slowly began to disperse, murmurs trailing behind them like smoke, the moment cracked. The redwoods stood tall and solemn, casting long shadows over what remained of the clearing. The battle was over, but victory hung hollow in the air. Amos shifted beside Nymera, his voice a grim whisper. "We didn't win." His eyes were fixed on the blood-darkened earth where Cain had fallen. "We survived. And barely." Nymera nodded, her gaze haunted but steady. "Sometimes," she said softly, "survival demands a terrible price." The last rays of the setting sun bled across the training field, painting the assembled wolves in hues of gold and crimson. Silverclaw and the allied pack stood shoulder to shoulder, an unprecedented sight. A hush fell as Nymera stepped forward, her eyes scanning the faces before her, young and old, scarred and eager. "Tonight, we mark a new beginning," she began, her voice echoing with unwavering strength. "We have weathered a storm, a tempest of misplaced ambition and broken trust. From the wreckage, we have learned harsh lessons, etched in pain and etched in the very fabric of our packs." She paused, her gaze softening as it rested on the younger wolves. "Let these words find purchase in your hearts. Love is not a prize to be seized, a territory to be conquered. It is a sacred bond, forged in the crucible of loyalty, sacrifice, and unwavering respect. It is earned, not demanded. It is nurtured, not stolen." Nymera's voice rose, resonating with fierce conviction. "Loyalty is not blind obedience, but a conscious choice. It is standing beside your pack even when the path is shrouded in darkness. It is speaking the truth, even when it stings. It is defending what is right, even when it is difficult." Her gaze then returned to Tauren, her face softening once more with love and respect. "Tauren is my anchor, my strength. He never wavered. And I am his." She extended a hand to Jarek, who stood tall and resolute amidst the Silverclaw training field. "And respect is the bedrock upon which we build our strength. It is acknowledging the worth of every wolf, regardless of their past. It is understood that true power lies not in dominion, but in service. It is in extending a hand to those who seek redemption." She paused, her eyes locking with Jarek's. "We see the potential in you to lead, to be honest, to be just." Tauren stepped forward, his presence radiating authority and wisdom. He looked at the gathered packs. "Leadership is not about demanding fealty. It's about inspiring trust. It's about making hard choices, not for personal gain, but for the good of the whole. It's about honesty, even when the truth is bitter. It's about admitting mistakes, learning from them, and striving to do better." He looked at Jarek and nodded. "We welcome Jarek as one of us, as an alpha, but an alpha who knows that he must do better and that everyone may fall sometimes, but if they are willing to lead with honor, they are an alpha we can follow." He addressed Jarek directly. "Jarek, you have shown us the courage to confront your past, the humility to learn from your failures, and the strength to dedicate yourself to a better future. We offer you this opportunity, this alliance, not because we are naive, but because we believe in the power of redemption, the strength of second chances, and the possibility of growth. We welcome you, not into our ranks, but as an equal." Tauren turned back to the crowd. "Tonight, we stand united, not just in strength of arms, but in strength of spirit. We are bound not by blood, but by shared values. Love, loyalty, respect, and honesty. We are a pack that chooses growth over stagnation. We choose truth over deception. We choose hope over despair. Nymera stepped forward once more, the setting sun casting her in an almost ethereal glow. Her voice resonated with a power that stilled the entire clearing. Remember this above all else. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the assembled wolves, imbuing her words with the weight of hard-won wisdom. Desire without respect is destruction. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. They were a warning, a promise, a guiding principle. The silence stretched, allowing the truth of her words to sink deep into the heart of every wolf present. Then it began. A low, guttural rumble, the sound building from the core of each wolf, echoing off the surrounding trees. It was a howl, but unlike any they had uttered before. It was a howl of understanding, of acceptance, of shared purpose. It was a howl of unity. It rose and swelled, a chorus of voices blending, a testament to their shared commitment. It was a promise made not in blood but in truth. The howl faded, leaving a profound silence in its wake. Then, with a deep breath, Nymera nodded, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. The ceremony was complete. Before the pack dispersed, a few of the pack, led by a young pup, carried a heavy stone plaque to the edge of the training field and carefully set it in place. It reads Silverclaw's 2025. Desire without respect is destruction. Love is earned. Honor is never optional. That's the end of this tale. But in the world of the supernatural, there's always another shadow waiting. Thank you for staying with me through every twist, turn, and heartbeat. If you enjoyed the ride, there's more waiting for you. Just check out the other audiobooks on this channel. Don't forget to subscribe if you want more magic, monsters, and stories that go bump in the night. Until next time, stay curious, and Braven, never stop listening.